Thank you for joining us tonight. We're very excited to present this webinar on AP and dual enrollment and the admissions impact that it might have. I know many of you students out there are probably getting ready for scheduling season and choosing courses for next year. So we hope this information is timely and helpful as you're considering all of your different options for your courses. I want to introduce myself, and then I'll have our panelists introduce themselves. And then we will get started. So my name is Jamie Kirby. I'm a consultant with Estrella Consulting. We are based in Ohio, a team of about 5 consultants, but we work with students all across Ohio and the country and even internationally. So we have students everywhere, you know, grades 10 through 12, some 8th, 9th graders as well. So big variety of students we work with. My colleague Amber is also here with us. She's going to be helping man the Q&A. So you may see her respond to a question here and there, or at the end, ask some of your questions to our panelists. So as we present, if you have questions, feel free to add them, use the Q&A button to ask them throughout or at the end, and Amber will help with that as well. I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves, and then we will get started. So Mark, would you like to go first?
Certainly. My name is Mark Emblidge. I'm a former Assistant Director of Admissions at Rochester Institute of Technology. I worked at RIT. Well, this is my second tour of duty at RIT, but I'm approaching 20 years at RIT, mostly in admissions and a few years in alumni relations. My career has also included stops at Fordham University, Alfred University, and the University of Rochester.
Thank you. April?
Hi, everyone. My name is April Gamble from the College of Wooster. I'm an Associate Director of Admissions. Before I got into admissions, I was an elementary school teacher.
Great, thank you. Karina?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you tonight. Karina Moore, I'm the Deputy Director for the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at the University of Michigan. I've been doing this work for, this is my 23rd year, so quite a bit of time.
Thank you. And Tracy?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tracy Shuman, and I'm an Associate Director of Undergraduate Admissions at The Ohio State University. I've been with Ohio State for about 11 and a half years, but working in higher ed for about 20. So glad to be here tonight.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. Before we get started on questions, I do want to just kind of do a slight overview on AP and dual enrollment. Make sure we have common language as far as what we're talking about, especially with dual enrollment, as that can vary state by state as far as what they call it or what it's considered. So AP courses are overseen by the College Board. They are usually standard across high schools. Students taking AP courses will need to take the AP test to be able to get college credit. And the scores that will get college credit may vary college by college as far as what they'll accept, but they are the courses that have tests involved to get credit. Dual enrollment can vary a bit state by state. Here in Ohio, it's called College Credit Plus. Other states might call it dual enrollment, dual credit, different things like that. But it is essentially college credits taken while in high school through a college. So you don't have to take a test to get credit. You just get your grade and your credit based on taking the course, just like you were taking it out of college.
Oh no, we lost Jamie.
You're frozen, Jamie.
Closed. Yes, that's okay. I'm sure she'll be back on. But in the spirit of common language, I'll just take the baton because I was assisting her in working on this. There, she's back. Hi.
I am so sorry. We are having bad weather. Well, it's just cold weather, but our power went out. So I am back on a hotspot on my phone. So okay. I am so sorry. Okay.
No, I took that baton and was just about to just round out the explanation of AP. So you were saying testing versus the grade.
Yeah.
Back to you.
Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, just to make sure we have that common language as far as what we're talking about, we will potentially talk a little bit at the end about IB courses and how those are considered. But for the purposes of tonight, for the most part, it will be AP and dual enrollment. So I would like to start out with a question for April, if that's okay. One of the big questions students and families often have is the variety in curriculum between high schools. So schools are going to offer different things. Different students at different high schools have different opportunities available to them. So how does that impact their application in review? Are they being, considered compared to students from other high schools who had different things offered? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, Jamie, thank you. That's such a great question because it gets to the question of sort of equity in education, right? We know that students come from so many different kinds of backgrounds and have so many different kinds of educational experiences. And one of the things that colleges try really hard to do is look at a student within the context of what's available at their school. And so Wooster, like so many colleges, when we see a student's application, we also get a form from the high school called a secondary school report. And that gives us information on how many APs are offered, how much college credit plus might be offered, is IB an option? It also tells us if a student is going to be limited. There are schools where students can only take 2 APs a year, or they can max out only at 5. And so when we look at an application, we're looking at students within the context of what is available at their school. Does that answer kind of what you're asking?
Yes, exactly. Does anybody else have anything different or anything they want to add to that? Perfect. Okay, thank you. Question for Tracy then. When you're looking at a student's transcripts, how do you consider AP and dual enrollment courses? Do you consider them equally? Is one more impactful than the other? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so at Ohio State, we look at both AP and dual enrollment courses equally as rigorous curriculum opportunities for students, and encourage them to take advantage of those when available. What we often see is students doing sometimes a little bit of both. So maybe taking some AP courses and maybe some dual enrollment courses. Maybe it's based more on interest or what's available to them. But when we review them, we're looking at them equally as both rigorous ways in which students are showing additional rigor and really maximizing what's available to them, or if what is available to them is limited, finding other opportunities to maximize that rigor as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything they want to add specific to their college? Okay. Karina, I'm going to ask you a question. We sometimes hear preferences for students maxing out the curriculum at their high school first before they move on to dual enrollment courses. So for example, I'm going to use math, taking the highest level math courses that they offer at a high school before they take a college math course, rather than, taking a college algebra class, earlier on in their career. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. We encourage students to take advantage of what's offered at their high school. And oftentimes what we find is that the school districts will cover or help pay for dual enrollment courses only if the student has exhausted the curriculum available in their schools. And that's when the district will pay for the next available class or the next level of course. And so if that is the case, then we encourage students to do that, right? To take advantage of their resources and take what's available to them at their school first. We're not going to negatively review a student for not doing that, not following that, right? It is completely up to the student. We just don't want any student to feel like they have to take dual enrollment and pay out of pocket to have a more competitive application. Because as Tracy said, we're going to look at both of those options as equally competitive.
Perfect. Mark, I have a question for you. When you're reviewing applications and looking at APs, we're going to move into specifically talking about AP for a minute. Is there a magic number of APs that you're looking for students to have?
Not really. There's, certainly one of the factors as part of our holistic review is the rigor of the student's curriculum, among so many other factors. Obviously, the GPA, class rank, if it's provided. We are test optional, but if students choose to submit AP or SAT scores, then we will consider those also. The activities they're involved in, the letters of recommendation, the essay, yada yada yada. Those are all things that we consider. But the more a student takes within reason, and again, it goes back to the context thing, like April mentioned earlier. Those do affect the rigor rating, and the rigor rating is important. But we don't want students, we want them to be able to enjoy being a student also, and not be so stressed out. So, to choose their AP courses, or IB courses, or dual enrollment courses wisely, so that they can be challenged, but not to the point of being super stressed out.
Perfect. Tracy, I'm going to sort of, go a little bit off of that question that's related. So when you're looking at a student's application and you're looking at the AP courses that they did take, do the specific courses matter, or does that, change by major? Like, are you looking for engineering students to have taken an AP math or AP physics, for example, or are you looking more just in general at how many APs they took?
Well, we're looking for overall rigor. So for a student who's maybe going to be more heavily challenging themselves in the social sciences or the liberal arts, that's certainly not a negative. But one of the things that Ohio State values, and we put this on our website, so we are very transparent, is that we do give additional consideration in our review process for students who go above and beyond in math, science, and foreign language. So in those three specific areas, we know that if a student goes above and beyond, they have historically performed well at Ohio State. As a research institution, those are foundational areas that students who've again, gone above and beyond have done well in. So those, I think, are the areas we are encouraging students who are really focused on Ohio State to maximize. But again, the student who's gone above and beyond in English or psychology, things like that, those certainly isn't a negative. But those three specific subject areas we know at Ohio State is beneficial for a student in the long run.
Okay. And I know that might vary by college. Do any of you at other colleges have different policies or different things you're looking for as far as that goes?
Jamie, similar to what Tracy shared, we overall are looking for rigor. However, each of our schools and colleges do have preferences or sometimes even requirements that are different that differ from each other. Because when students apply to Michigan, they're applying to a specific school or college. So in that case, we would prefer that students are seeking that rigor in their curriculum in the areas that the school or college they're interested in are requiring, right? And so, as you mentioned, engineering applicants, we don't require calculus, but we would prefer that they take calculus if it's available in their high schools. And if they have access to AP Calc or a dual enrollment math calculus, then we would prefer that they find that rigor there if they're applying to engineering.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can I add one thing for Wooster? There is a specific AP series of classes that we're really excited about when we see on a student's transcript, and that's AP Capstone, which would include the research and seminar. We know that's not available everywhere, but those are two classes I think that are some of the most transformational classes that I hear about from students. I think they have an independence in those classes that they might not have in other AP classes in terms of, coming up with great questions, learning to do research on their own. And so for students who have that as an option, I do think the writing and research skills that you might gain in those two classes really do make you stand out as a student. And again, we're aware that not all schools offer that, but I do think if students have that as an option, it's a great conversation to have with their counselor, with their family, and with themselves about, is that something that they are ready to take on?
I can add to kind of echo what Karina said. We're in a similar situation at our IT where we do have different requirements depending on the college and major that the student is applying to. And what's a little bit different about our IT in terms of engineering, for example, is that we have both a College of Engineering and a separate College of Engineering Technology. And the math and science requirements do vary depending on which college they're applying to. Sometimes we'll get, well, like Michigan, we don't require calculus. We prefer to see it, but it's not required. We do require they've at least taken a 4-year sequence that includes pre-calc. But for the College of Engineering, we would also need to see physics and chemistry. Whereas with engineering technology, we recommend that they've taken pre-calc, but we don't require it. And instead of requiring both physics and chemistry, we just need to see one or the other. So that's what's more important for us is, have they taken these courses that are required? Every year we'll get students who apply, they'll list their first, second, and third choice majors all being in the College of Engineering, but they didn't take physics or they didn't take pre-calc. And then we try to work with them. We'll reach back out to them and say, okay, you're not going to qualify for the majors that you list on your application, but here are some other majors that might be of interest to you. And oftentimes they will take us up and say, oh yeah, I'd be interested in that major. So a little variation.
Thank you. So a big takeaway from that I would recommend to everyone out there is do your research on the schools you're looking at. So a lot of that information is available on their websites. If you dig into the admissions site, you can usually see what courses are required, or reach out to admissions office and ask, this is what I'm interested in majoring in, what would you recommend? So definitely do that research. I'm going to shift slightly from AP courses into AP tests and test scores. We get so many questions about whether AP scores are considered in the admissions process, and then if they are, what scores to submit. So a few questions around that topic. So Mark, would you be willing to start us off with, in general, do you look at AP test scores for admissions purposes in general?
Well, the test scores, a lot of times we're not, if they're taken during the senior year, we're not going to even see them. But if they took them in the junior year or prior and they chose to share them with us, we can see them. But I think in general, we're more concerned with, what did they take? What level did they take them at? And that they did take AP courses is more important. I'm having a hard time spitting that out for some reason. In terms of scores, in terms of getting credit for them, we draw the line. If it's a liberal artsy kind of a class, a psychology, a history, a foreign language, then a grade of 3 will typically get them credit. It might just be a free elective, but if they get a 4 or a 5 on the same exam, they might get a specific class or classes. For the more STEM intensive programs, typically departments want to see at least a 4 to give credit. But there are a few exceptions, like within the College of Engineering, some of the physics exams, even if they get a 5 on the AP physics, they might not get any credit for it because we've determined over time that there are things they weren't learning in those classes, and we needed to kind of raise the ladder for those.
Perfect, thank you. I'll open that up actually to everyone else because I know that may vary school by school. Could you, does anybody else want to jump in with whether they consider scores in the admissions process? And if so, what scores would help?
I just think this is a great moment for students to make sure they have a conversation with their family and their counselor to find out if those scores are automatically being printed on the transcript or not.
Yeah.
So as a student, as a family, those scores don't need to be there unless you want them to be there, right? The original intent, I think, was to be helpful so you wouldn't have to pay College Board to report them. But if you have a 1 or a 2 on an AP exam, I would take that off your transcript. I don't think it helps you in any way to show those lower scores. It's still, as Mark said, it's still really exciting and meaningful that you've taken the class, but those seeing a score in a transcript, you know, it can be distracting, I think, as a reader, and maybe give an impression that's not as great. I wanted to. It's kind of funny, Mark. Wooster kind of is a flip-flop from what you said in terms of liberal arts and STEM classes. We give credit for a 4 or 5 unless it's AP Calculus, and then we'll take a 3. And about 12 years ago, we had a research team of students at Wooster track students who had a 3, 4, or 5 on their AP exam and see how they did in our math curricula here. And there was really no major difference. So we now accept a 3 for AP Calculus. Otherwise, it's a 4 or a 5. But I would check about, you know, whether those things show up in your transcript. Obviously, the same thing is true for SAT and ACT scores too.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, Karina or Tracy, do you have anything different you want to add to that?
I'll just quickly add that we don't use the scores in our review. Again, many students are taking the majority of maybe those courses in their senior year, so often we don't see them at the time of application. But we do give credit to students who have a 3 or higher in all AP courses. Now, similar to what Mark shared, a 3 will definitely give you credit in any of those classes, but you're more likely to get more specific credit with a 4 or 5, and perhaps more than even 1 semester worth of credit if you have a 4 or 5. All of that is actually listed on the Ohio State website, so it's very easy for students to see. And so you have a sense of, you know, the type of credit the transfer credit you'd be eligible for.
Perfect.
And Jamie, I'll just add that because we are a test optional school, we won't consider scores, even if students, you know, early in their high school careers or in junior year, they sent the scores to us, but then on the application, they indicate that they don't want us to consider scores, we won't consider them. On the flip side, if they want us to consider their AP scores, but they prefers not to consider their SAT scores, for example, then they can say that to us, and we can consider those AP scores as part of their application, of our review of their application. We take a few 3s in some subjects, but mostly 4s and 5s. And the guidelines, as our colleagues have shared, the guidelines are on our website and easy to navigate and very clear. It is based on school or college, so engineering takes different scores than liberal arts, for example, the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts. But it is clear, and students can decide, maybe based on that, whether or not they want us to look at their scores.
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to shift gears slightly from AP to dual enrollment specifically, a couple dual enrollment specific questions. So we've established, you know, dual enrollment are college courses. Most of you look at them, you know, equally to APs in general. When it comes to transferring dual enrollment credits, I'm going to start with Tracy, I think, on this. Do you have majors that require your college's specific courses to be taken, or a specific number to be taken on campus towards a degree, or will all credits transfer in?
Yes and no. So if the program within Ohio, College Credit Plus was what we call our dual enrollment program here in Ohio. The courses that students are eligible to take in their high school, or while they're in high school, I should say, are courses that have been pre-approved that are transferable and accepted to any of the public institutions in the state of Ohio. So that gives students some certainty that the courses they're taking will transfer if they're going to any of those institutions. If it's coming from a private institution or outside the state of Ohio, we would do a review to see if we have a transfer course equivalency and provide student the credit if needed. However, though, there are instances where there are some programs where a student may have taken college level chemistry or physics or math, and depending on the actual college or major they're in, we may award them the actual credit for that course, perhaps give them the credit hours as maybe like general education requirements. But similar to what was shared earlier, we may still have them take that specific course again at Ohio State. So one example I know of is a student I worked with in the past is a biochemistry major, had college level chemistry, and we asked that they retake it because they were in that specific subject. So those are, I think, some of those, again, similarly shared. But I would say in general, if a student is in that situation, we still are trying to award them those credit hours that can go to some of perhaps their general education requirements or some elective options, so that they're still being rewarded for the work that they've done, but maybe have to just focus in specifically on their major and those courses directly when they're at Ohio State.
Perfect. Does anybody else have anything pretty different from that? Pretty good, pretty similar. Okay. So sort of along those lines then, if as a high school student, let's say a sophomore or junior, is thinking about their courses and they're thinking, you know, potentially being an engineering major, would it benefit them to take a college level physics class, or a nursing major, would it benefit them to take a college credit plus anatomy class, or would they be better off waiting and taking that at the college level? I didn't really ask anybody specific. I guess I'll let anybody jump in on that one.
Can I have just one thought, and then I'd love to hear my colleagues' thoughts on that too. I mean, I think like behind all of these big questions is the idea that, you know, students need to be intentional about their choices. They need to think carefully about what they're taking and why they're taking it. And there's a really nice place in the application, in the common application, that says additional information where students can share, you know, maybe what would look like an either unconventional choice or something that you wonder about as a reader. And my example I'll give is that at our local high school, there are 2 amazing electives that seniors can take that are not honors, they're not IB, they're not AP, they're not dual enrollment, but they're electives that seniors really love to take. We're in a small town, not a super diverse small town religiously, maybe. So there's a class on the Holocaust and Jewish history, and there's a class on the history of race relations in the United States. And I think, you know, for students who choose those electives over an IB or over dual enrollment or AP or anything else, I think if a student can explain why, I think that's the most wonderful thing to hear. And I think, you know, all of us here on this panel, you know, care deeply about students and their mental health and their well-being. And what we want to see is students who are able, with great support, to be able to make, you know, good decisions about their curriculum. There's no magic formula, right? I think if you listen to all of us tonight, what we want to do is try to help your students and listen to them. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I love that answer. It was a great answer. Does anybody else have thoughts they want to add? Otherwise, we might open it up to the Q&A, because that was a great thought to end on, actually. Perfect. Okay, let's open it up to the Q&A. Amber has been manning that. If you want to throw out some questions, while you do that, I am going to add some links to the chat. I shared a few earlier from RIT. Some of our panelists might add a few. I am also going to add our upcoming Estrella events. So we have lots of webinars like these. We also have a newsletter as well. So I'm going to share a couple links in the chat, and then Amber can run the Q&A.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jamie. Great job, everyone. I have been told many times that I make a lot of faces when people respond to things. I don't have a poker face. If I'm feeling it, it's on my face. So well said by everyone. I think the takeaway that I would walk away with, or hope that parents, particularly who are on this call, would walk away with, is that your child will be evaluated in the context of their high school, what's available to them, and the story that they're telling in the courses that they're choosing, which, you know, we counsel students that way frequently. You know, your course selection tells a story about you in a way as well. Okay, so with that, a couple really good, not even a couple, many amazing questions in the chat. So this one we didn't touch on in the dual enrollment conversation, but we're going to loop back to that. For dual enrollment, when you're looking at a transcript, do you differentiate between courses taught at a community college by an instructor? Maybe they're an associate professor, maybe they're like an adjunct instructor, or maybe a full professor, but taught at a community college or technical college nearby, versus at a high school with a high school teacher. Is there any distinction in your minds as admissions counselors between the two? And I guess I'm curious to hear from Mark.
Yeah,
and
go
one
ahead.
of our Big Teners. Mark and one of our Big Tens.
So we don't distinguish. Our criteria with like dual enrollment credits is that the course is comparable to something that we offer at RIT, and in most cases they are. That the grade is C or better, and obviously that it's coming from an accredited, properly accredited institution. Whether the course was taught, if it was taught in the high school, it needs to be, affiliated with, we need to get a college transcript from whatever school, whether it's a community college or a four-year school that they're affiliated with. But other than that, we don't distinguish.
Okay. Let's go, Tracy, just because of last night, although I'm very pleased to know that both Michigan and Ohio State can set aside their differences for the sake of AP and dual enrollment.
Absolutely. So it's very similar to what Mark shared. We don't make any type of distinction of where the course is taught, whether it's within the high school or at a 2 or 4 year institution. Often the teachers who are teaching it in a high school have to meet certain requirements, maybe to be hired at that institution. So almost like an adjunct there. So we aren't differentiating between the two. And in fact, some of the things I've learned is students often enjoy taking the dual enrollment if it's available at the high school, because it still allows them to continue to have sort of that traditional high school experience within their day.
Excellent. Anyone have different things to weigh in on with that question? My takeaway is we're not distinguishing between the two. Excellent. All right. Let's see. There was another really good one. And it was about, this is a newer AP to the mix. How do you feel about AP pre-calculus? Some colleges, and I kind of think of this as similar to the AP literature of 11th grade and the AP Lang question of senior year. So how do you feel about AP calculus? Some colleges will not use that AP score for college credit because they're looking to see something higher, like an AP Calc AB or BC. What if a kiddo tops out at AP pre-calculus, like as a senior? So kind of two questions embedded in there. Let's hear from Michigan and, sorry, Karina. I know, you're more than your logo behind you. Karina and April.
Thank you, Amber. We are always happy to see students take advantage of the rigor offered to them. And if AP Pre-Calc is available to them, and especially if they're interested in STEM, a STEM major, then we want them to take advantage of that. At this time, U of M is not granting credit for AP Pre-Calculus. However, that we do acknowledge in our application review process that that is an AP course, and that there are criteria, right, and curriculum requirements that students in AP Pre-Calc have to follow that may not be in place in a regular Pre-Calc class. Again, all within the context of a high school. And so if a student, and also within the context of the student's interest and fit, right? It's about the best fit for the student as well. And so, yes, if it's available and the student is interested in it, take it.
Yeah, I would really echo what Karina said too. What we're looking for students who are taking appropriately demanding classes, right? So for some students, AP pre-calculus is just the right math class for them. And again, these are these conversations to have with counselors and family, and if you're working with an independent counselor or a CBO, these are people who can help you think through those options and figure out what's best for you.
Yeah. All pushing toward the same goal. We want to help each student figure out what their unique path is. We love choices, but sometimes choices can be confusing and overwhelming. So we mentioned at the top, Jamie mentioned IB. For those on this webinar who perhaps don't even know what that is because your high school doesn't offer that, it stands for International Baccalaureate. And I almost think of it in a weird way as liberal arts education with a global spin at a high school level, is how I've described it in the past. However, similar to AP, it can have credit equivalencies in a higher education environment. So curious to know, also asked a couple times in the Q&A, how is IB viewed in relationship to AP and dual enrollment? Are they kind of all holding equal weight on the scale? Does IB get a little extra tip of the cap? And let's go April and Mark.
Thank you. I love talking about IB. Both of my kids did IB at a local public school here in Worcester. My niece did it. She's from Switzerland, and my other niece, who's French, did it. And so I think one of the coolest things about it is that it truly is international. So we have kids here at Wooster from Zimbabwe, and we have kids from Canada who have all done IB. And so it's a really wonderful shared experience. I think for kids who love research and writing, IB is an amazing fit. IB also has I would say in a lot of ways, as you said, Amber, it's much more of a global curriculum. Even in terms of the reading list, you're going to see lots more international authors on it. We give credit for IB HL scores of 5, 6, or 7. And we actually, Worcester historically has given out its highest merit aid to IBDP diploma program graduates. There are a lot of reasons that it's a really good fit for us. And any family ever wants to talk about IB and whether or not it's the right option for their kids, I can tell you how I bribed my own 2 children to do it. So.
Very
Well, I will add that, yeah, we definitely value a student who pursues the rigor of an IB curriculum with all that goes with it, the extended essay, the theory of knowledge class, the service and arts and everything else that goes along with it. So, you know, in terms of evaluating a student's rigor, if I see they're doing the full IB diploma, you know, we give them maximum rigor score automatically with that. And yeah, I think it's a great program. I'm always again in awe of students who do that. I remember interviewing a student many years ago who chose to add rigor by doing his extended essay in a foreign language. I thought that was especially impressive. Our policy is similar to what April mentioned. We will give credits for higher level exams only for grades of 5 or higher on the IB.
Okay, very good. So, and I want to hear from, I think, Karina, because I'm curious about
Actually, can I interrupt for a second? One thing I did forget to mention is there is one stumbling block we run into as a more STEM intensive school, although we're a STEAM school, but and that is that sometimes physics is not available to them. And that is one of our requirements for admission to our College of Engineering. So that's one of the stumbling blocks with the IB program. Some students are able to get it, others are not. So that's one thing to be aware of.
Yes,
Sorry.
no, that's actually a great point. I had a student that did the full IB curriculum, and her school did not have the IB level physics, but they had AP physics. And so she was able to supplement accordingly for her future applications to STEM majors. Great point. I'd love to hear from Michigan, from you, Karina, on this, because I'm hearing, while we love the rigor that AP and dual enrollment offers, the IB adds not just rigor, but maybe it's incorporating some of that critical thinking and writing and research component that AP Capstone would offer. But IB, it's all wrapped into the full 2-year diploma. Okay, Karina.
Yeah, thank you, Amber. I would agree with both April and Mark in that we highly consider IB. We consider it very rigorous. And we think, we see that students, especially students who complete a DP, the diploma program, are very successful here. However, I want to emphasize that we acknowledge that IB is not available to a lot of students in the country and in the world. And when students have access to both or to all three options, right? IB, AP, and dual enrollment, we encourage them to think about how they learn, right? Because they're very different approaches. And so, I might like IB, right, or AP, one or the other better, but it's not what I like, right? In the application process, we're going to look at them and consider them equally in terms of rigor. It's about what is going to be the best fit for the student, where are they going to be most successful, and also what's going to meet their needs for the classes that they want to take if they're applying to schools that require specific courses, right? Like Mark pointed out, a student completing a full IB diploma might be able to take the full physics, right? If physics is available, but won't have space for chemistry, right? Unless they took chemistry in 9th or 10th grade. And so we want students to set themselves up for success. And so if they're super independent, love research, and want to learn, then IB might be a great fit. And if it's available to them, right? But if they want the rigor and they, want to have access to lots of different options, right? And not be locked into the two-step 2-year classes that IB offers, then AP might be a better option for them. So once again, it's about the fit and talking to their counselors at school and others who can help them make those decisions.
Absolutely. And I'm going to be putting a response to a question in the chat. Sorry to whomever posed it. It was posed anonymously. I accidentally marked it as answered before I answered it. Okay. This goes for all AP and IB courses. Very interesting question. And wondering, what is your impression if you see AP on a transcript for IB, but no test score reported, which I know with IB is a little trickier because those exams tend to come more senior year. But AP, let's say you see a student has taken the course, maybe even got an A, but no exam score is reported. What impression does the admission committee have with that? If they have, let's say, said, please consider my test scores and have maybe a strong ACT or SAT score, throwing in a couple of curveballs. So let's hear from Tracy and April on that.
Thanks, Amber. So we aren't going to be looking for the AP scores in our review. Students often, at least at Ohio State, will wait to send those scores until they've decided that they plan to enroll to get those transfer credits and have that credit awarded to them. So we typically don't see them. We do encourage students to take the test because I know sometimes that's an option that students may take the class but choose not to take the test. We do encourage them to do that. But if we don't see a score, we don't hold that against them, or it's not part of our review. So students can wait to do that at a later date without any fear that that will harm their review.
Yeah,
I'll
I'll echo Tracy. Oh, sorry. Was it me?
No, I interrupted. Carry on, April.
Okay, I was just going to say, I would echo that too. We're not looking for test scores in the review. But again, I would go back to what I said earlier and just check with your school and make sure that test scores aren't being automatically printed without you being aware of it.
Yes, yes. I do know, and it has seemed to me, seeing multiple transcripts, at least from students in Ohio, that is not being reported on transcripts any longer. That I don't know what other states are doing, but there seems to be a trend away from that as schools realize that perhaps reporting without a student's permission might hurt the student in some way. All right, let's see. Let's see if we have another good question. I'm looking. These are really good. We've answered a lot of these already. Jamie, I don't know if you see any that are.
I see one actually that I would love. I feel like we've answered most of them, but there is one I would love to just throw out there for opinions from a couple of different people. So this one is about adding. So a student who has been involved in marching or concert band, let's say, and their senior year, they've got the option to stay in it, or they have the option to drop it and take an AP course or something that's going to weight their GPA higher. I know that my advice would be to stay in band because I feel like having that, continued involvement, I think is really important and showing that well-roundedness, but I actually would love to hear the admissions office perspectives as well. So I will throw that out there, maybe to Mark and April.
There we go. Yeah, I agree. Well, we do have, as I mentioned before, specific admission requirements for different programs. And as long as those requirements are being satisfied in what they've taken, if they want to stay with band also, I think that's an awesome decision. But not having band is not going to keep them, it's not going to prevent them from being admitted, but not having a required course would. So once they've made all those check marks with the required courses, beyond that, if they want to stick with band or whatever, they're certainly welcome to do that. And I would just add too, in the last few years, RIT is really growing performing arts, which is not something people typically expect from an institute of technology, but we actually are offering performing arts scholarships. And we now have more than 2,000 students on campus who are getting these performing arts scholarships. So, and we're building a new music center as well on campus that will be done by 2026.
So I just finished reading Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation. And so your question makes me really think about that book. And my answer would be, if too much AP keeps you from exploring life and growing as a relational human being, then cut it out.
Yep.
But be aware that you're cutting it out. Again, it's that you're making a choice. You're choosing yes or no to something, and be able to, as a student, sort of defend why music matters to you and what it does for you as a human being. I love hearing from students who decide to take a course because their favorite teacher is teaching it. That is, I mean, as a former educator also, what makes you happier than knowing that? But college is like that too. I know so many students who you've got to take a class with, Dr. Nurse in sociology. She's so amazing. Like, find those mentors. Those are the things that are going to make you healthy, happy people.
I know for any educators or parents on this call, like the way I've over the years come to explain that decision to parents and students. Like, one of the things that they're starting to do is make decisions that they're balancing potentially future ripple effects with, and that is part of the gradual entry into adulthood. And every decision as you move closer and closer to adulthood will have an opportunity cost, because at the end of the day, you only have so many hours. And just because something is available doesn't mean you should do it, should take it. So it comes down to, and this is my new 2025 mantra, it comes down to introspection and students really growing their own self-knowledge of what they want. They don't have to know exactly who they are, but what brings you joy, what, you know, fills your cup, so to speak. And I think we're trending ideally in higher ed. You know, it has seemed somewhat like an arms race as of late in selectivity world, but I hope there's a shift coming where we're getting back to joy and back to students doing things for the love of it and less for the look of it. Let's see. I think I have one more really good question that came through in two different ways. And it's about accepting credit. So first, would there be an example of when a credit wouldn't be accepted? Let's say it's, or maybe accepted for electives, but not toward a major, perhaps. So that could be AP or dual enrollment. And then is there ever an option for a student to decline credit, or if that credit has implications for placement, can the student decline that? So kind of two questions in there. Let's hear from our a private and one of our publics. So let's hear from Mark and Tracy.
Okay, I can't really think of an example about the second part of your question about the declining the credit. That I'd have to defer to an academic advisor or defer to the registrar's office in terms of why they might want to do that. In terms of situations where we might not give credit, I suppose if it's we sometimes will get students who are applying to return to RIT after being away for 5 years or 8 years or whatever. And depending on what program they were in, like technology changes so quickly, it's possible that a course they took 8 years ago might not still transfer. That's, I guess, the really kind of the first thing that comes to mind for me would be a situation like that. But I think in most cases, if they meet the criteria I mentioned earlier of, comparable to something that we offer and a grade of C or better, then it should transfer. It's just a matter of how it gets applied to the major as a free elective or satisfying a gen ed requirement.
Yeah, I echo what Mark had to say. I can't think of a specific instance, not that that hasn't happened or that students don't encounter that occasionally. I think it's probably more of an exception than the rule, and the students might be working with that more through their academic advisor and the registrar's office. Because what I feel from just my experience is that while a student may not get exact credit, like a 1-for-1 match, we're often honoring the hours that a student has. Again, that can be applied to a variety of areas. So I think we're still trying to be flexible, even if there isn't that specific transferability, that 1-for-1 match. And as far as declining credit, I can't think of an example for that myself either. I suppose a student could retake a course if they liked. But if they felt that was more appropriate or preparing them within that college and that major, and that might make sense. But I don't have any specific examples that I'm aware of that in that instance.
I actually thought of one, and I am so impressed with myself because I'm not always like Johnny on the spot with these like really niche things. I had one example in 16 years of where this happened, and it was a student who took a CCP, is what we call it in Ohio, as Tracy mentioned, a dual enrollment course like 9th grade, 10th grade, because it's available in Ohio, grades 7 through 12. Very young still in her academic journey, hadn't quite established all of those executive functioning skills and academic skills to manage her workload and time, and earned a C in a dual enrollment biology course that would have later implications on her GPA when she applied to med school. And so she opted to retake that course in college. So even though, she worked with her advisor as she was choosing her freshman level courses in college, but that is, I would say, sometimes I've said many times to parents, like, if I see any real cons with dual enrollment, that is one of them. Your child is starting their college transcript, and that transcript is tied to their social security number, which is all like together in the big mishmash cloud somewhere with all their grades and follows them. And there can be implications if they're not ready for that level of work at that point when they're trying to take it. When CCP first started, it was like a mad dash and everyone wanted to do it. The student I just referenced was in that pile, and it just wasn't a good fit at that time. Had she waited a year or two and taken that same course, she might have done much better as a more mature high school student. So there you go. How was that for an example?
Perfect.
I can add to that, Amber. During the years when I was at the University of Rochester, I worked with their 8-year medical program, and sometimes that was an issue for students where they had taken these classes, but they were still going to need to take them at the U of R. They couldn't be applied toward medical school, so which is frustrating. I mean, you can console them by saying, well, we did consider the rigor of what you did, and it was a factor in your admission, but unfortunately for medical school, you might need to retake a class or two.
One of the questions we get a lot that for anyone listening, I hope can be taken to heart is like, well, why am I doing all of this sometimes? And I think knowing your why is important, and taking a rigorous AP course, even if you maybe don't end up submitting the score, sometimes parents are like, well, where was the value add there? And the value add inherently with a course that's appropriately challenging is going to be the critical thinking skills, the sense of challenge. Ideally, they're doing it in a subject they like. So they're getting a taste of what's in store for them. And then, part of that value add is it does show up as transcript on your high school transcript, and I've told students, it's not a guarantee of admission, but it at least puts you on the doorstep ringing the doorbell. So for what that's worth. Alrighty, Jamie, back to you.
I think that was a fabulous way to wrap it up, actually. So that was a great ending thought. I put in the chat some links from our panelists and some links to upcoming Estrella events. I first accidentally sent them just to the panelists, so I resent them, I believe, to everyone. Feel free to reach out to me if you need another copy of those or anything, but I think we are all set. So thank you so much for everyone for joining us. We will send out a recording to those who registered. So if you are watching this on the recording as well, thanks for joining us. And I think that's it. So have a great night. Thank you, everyone.